think we need to clap because we're all...
No, we're all literally all here.
You just start whenever you like.
Hi, and welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Darling in the FRANXX, the anime of the first and second cours of 2018 that no one could stop talking about until the show ended and everyone immediately did. But we're not done talking about it because there's a lot to unpack. My name is Caitlin. I am a staff editor and writer for Anime Feminist, as well as writing for my own website. I have a heroin problem, heroin spelled with an E. And I also write regularly for the Daily Dot.
I'm Peter Fobian. I'm an associate features editor at Crunchyroll and a contributor and editor at Anime Feminist.
I am Natasha. I'm also a writer for the blog Shibireru Daro. Easier word would be, isn't it electrifying? I also sometimes write feature articles for Crunchyroll.
So we are all in the same room together right now. we also have two silent participants. So don't be alarmed if you hear voices.
Or yelling.
Hollering.
Because we make faces.
Do we want to introduce them as well?
So that was Michi just then. And here in the background, we have Steve Jones both of them from Anime News Network This Week in Anime.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that from Twitter.
Also from Twitter.
I think we're all from Twitter.
We are all from Twitter.
I live on Twitter.
We all like to have fun on Twitter.
Okay. So, as I said, we are talking about Darling in the FRANXX because there's a lot going on in that show. None of it good, really.
Honestly, thank you for bringing me back to this podcast and also reminding me that Darling in the FRANXX existed because it completely wiped itself off from my
Why would you thank me for that, though?
Well, we get the opportunity to explore many of the issues I think this series presented itself with.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique series because I don't think we normally talk about things that we pretty much all agree were bad and should be probably forgotten. But the reason for that is there's a lot to unpack, and not in the good way where there's lots of deep meanings and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. There's just so many problematic ideas in it that I feel like we need to discuss why it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I can't not say something about this. I can't just let this lie.
Layer cake of concern.
Mm-hmm, as opposed to your average titty anime where it's well, her boobs are all over the place. Well, that's an issue.
Titty anime's good.
Thanks, Mitchie.
Thanks, Mitchie.
We'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah.
We'll have a debate podcast.
But, fan service is a fairly straightforward problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not a problem, depending upon your perspective. If you like fan service, you watch the series. If you don't like fan service, you won't like the series. There's a lot to talk about in ways that might sexualize certain genders or types of people. But that's kind of straightforward, and you can talk about that in a more general sense. Darling in the FRANXX it's like a spider web.
I'd say it's more like an onion,
it's shit lasagna.
There's an outside layer of just okay, this is pretty bad, and then you just keep going, and it just keeps getting worse. It's just there are more layers, insidious layers of problems. It's
like that cheese they put into strings and then tie into knots, and they sell you just the knot. You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right,
that sounds amazing.
I'll put the name of that cheese in the show notes.
Sure.
I'm sure it's probably tastes better than Darling in the FRANXX.
So
it's cheese, so it's delicious.
And it's sad because I was at first a little trepidatious about Darling in the FRANXX, but I thought it had potential to be good. I thought it had potential to go some really interesting places. And I loved Zero too, because that's just sort of my kind of hero. People who listen regularly will just probably be yeah, that sounds right. She's kind of wild. She doesn't really care about the rules, and then it turns out it's just a taming of the shrew sort of thing.
Yeah,
it was also very misleading in its quality. That's a weird thing to say, but I remember they never showed the inside of 02 in Hero's cockpit for 2 to 3 episodes. And after seeing the orientation of the cockpit with all the other characters, you're just like, there must be a reason for this.
Yeah.
So the whole community had convinced itself that Hero 2 was going to be in the receiving position, I guess. But then they finally show the cockpit and it's exactly the same as everybody else's. So you're just like, why did you very specifically not show the inside for so long if you are going to do nothing with it?
Yeah.
I think that's like a repeated, that kind of is a summation of the series.
It's such a mess. Yeah. It's such a mess of like so much that it seems like it's going to be going to one place and do something different, and then it doesn't. It just
drops it.
Like, yeah.
There are a lot of drop concepts.
Mm-hmm,
I think.
There are.
And I think that lends itself to a lot of the issues Darling in the FRANXX, I personally had with Darling in the FRANXX, is that, you know, you bring up the idea of potential, which is sometimes like a hard word for me to use, because it's like, oh, these are ideas I assign to this show without knowing where it's going to lead, and sometimes that's like a mistake on my part. But I feel like Darling in the FRANXX very much sets up a lot of interesting ideas that and then it spends time devoting like to those ideas and pushing them in interesting places, and then it's just like a cliff. It's just like a sheer cliff. It just drops and it's never brought up again. And I think that really lends to the idea of not misplaced potential, but just like lost potential.
Right.
I think you're definitely right there. Another reason that the show is really worth talking about is because it did have a lot of potential. Like from a production standpoint, in regards to the animation, the budgets, the talent working on it, the character designs.
It's a good looking show.
It had Trigger's name on it, which means like half the anime fandom's immediately going to get plugged in.
Absolutely.
And then they kind of throw this world at you where, you know, it's kind of like a dystopian future where they're obviously wanting to play with some gender and sexual themes with mecha, which has been done very successfully before. So there's a lot that they could have said and they could have done with what they had. So thematically, it was like very fertile, I guess.
Yeah. Very fertile, much like Kokoro.
Then a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And then we got what we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did either of you go to any of the Trigger panels this weekend?
I did. But they were mainly for Little Witch Academia.
Yeah, I went to the Little Witch Academia one. I was just wondering, because it's been such a topic of debate, like how much Trigger was involved in the production. Because like there's that flow chart that someone made. It's like, was Trigger involved in this part of the anime? Did you like it? Yes. Trigger was involved. Did you like it? No. Trigger was not involved.
Yeah.
I think that was Lost Thief.
That was Lost Thief.
Was that Lost? Okay.
Yeah.
But I know Evan Minto. I think he's actually written an article on the subject. If not, you could probably just search Twitter with his handle and Darling in the FRANXX.
I'm sure he's written about it.
I know he's spoken with the people who work at Trigger at length regarding their involvement in the project. They were definitely around for a lot of like the groundwork, the pre-production stuff where they're designing the world, the setting, the mechs. They were around for character designs. As far as concept, I think he said that, I can't remember who the main writer was, but that was somebody at A1.
Atsushi Nishigori?
Nishigori, that's
Nishigori.
it. Yeah.
And then the Trigger was around after that.
Okay.
But I think it was mainly Nishigori's like brainchild.
I mean, I feel like there are a lot of fingerprints of Trigger in the sense of like the setting, the character designs, and just the scope of the world. Like,
there are action sequences that are definitely like, oh, that's Imaishi right there. Like,
It did. I mean, it had the classic Trigger. There's an enemy. Oh, it turns out that's not the enemy. Let's do a final battle in space formula.
Yeah, absolutely. or transformation. Like when the Silesia transformed in the first episode. When I see Trigger and I see transformation, I think Imaishi.
Yeah, Imaishi personally animated parts of it.
Yeah.
So Trigger was involved, but it's really hard to say how much of the writing was them. Apparently, this is very sort of common stuff for Nishigori. So you could look at Nishigori's past work and maybe make that assumption.
I think I'd rather not.
Okay, well,
I mean, I think at a safe standpoint, it's fair to say that animation-wise, technical-wise, like the show looks gorgeous. That's probably the most consistent thing about the show. Is that from start to end, it looks really nice. Very, very great action scenes, great character animation, great designs, great settings, great layouts, etc. But
sterling production. Yes.
Yeah. The one visual thing that drove me crazy was they used the dramatic dramatic widescreen.
Oh.
The dramatic letter.
Oh,
I
yeah.
kind of like that.
Every episode. So, like, I liked it at first, but then they use it every episode.
Like, I'm such a sucker for, like, visual drama, like very romantic, over dramatic scenes. So like for me, like I didn't personally mind it. I do think it was very funny. That was the only like stylistic visual direction element they really added. It's like they never used any like filters. They were just like, oh, let's just add that.
It is worth saying that they definitely did crib a lot of visuals from other popular mecha shows.
Oh, yeah.
Like Evangelion.
Steve is smirking in the background.
Well,
Just a little.
Yeah. There, if you've watched any other very popular mecha mecha anime in the past,
psychosexual mecha series.
you will like see
Absolutely.
extremely familiar shots.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of like a first reaction the community got, right? Was like a lot of people watched the first episode of Darling in the FRANXX and they were like, it seems very inspired by a lot of very famous mech shows, which is there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. Like
Yeah, copying stuff is not really looked down upon in anime.
Exactly.
As well. That's usually an homage.
Right.
And like a straightforward, because they don't want to hide the fact that it's an homage, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think one thing that ends up going on is that when you're inspired by something so significant, so influential, but you don't build upon it, it ends up feeling like a wasted reference.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about the production.
Yeah,
So we should probably get into the themes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so going back to the whole like wasted ideas and Peter's, I think it was your example that like Hero and 02 in the cockpit. Cockpit.
We're gonna have a lot of sexual jokes in here, I guess.
No, I'll try to keep it classy. No, I won't. Let's be real.
It's telling in the frames. Let's be real.
That's a really good example of something where it looks like they are leading to something interesting, leading to something different. You know, like leading to like really setting up, making it look like they're going to mess around with gender expectations and gender roles in some way.
Absolutely.
And then they just revert right back to the default, and it was so like insulting, like because it was just like, oh, he just wasn't confident enough. Oh, now he's doing it, and he's like, oh, it feels so good. Oh, it feels so amazing.
Oh,
It's just like, oh my god.
Jokes when he couldn't pilot.
I mean, I feel like if we're gonna tackle like gender tropes as a concept across, you know, the whole show, there's a lot of examples of that, right? Like there's obviously a Hero and 02, then there's some of the side characters.
Right, like Mitsuru.
Mitsuru, right? Mitsuru is like a really good example. Then there's the lesbian girl. Ikuno. Honestly, I feel like the only good example of actually a very solid heterosexual relationship was between what's her name? What's the girl with the red hair?
Miku and
Zorome, right? Like they were actually like solid couple.
I actually they were probably the most functional couple in the series. Even though he says rude shit about her, like she's cute when she's not talking.
Yeah. And then she would call him out, and she'd be like, "Man, you're like a piece of shit."
Well, to be honest, I really liked Hero and 02 at the start. And
me too.
Even deep into the series, like maybe just at this certain point, they passed from being like a really charming couple into like this weird, like they're like the most in love people could possibly be. So they just sort of like statically sit next to each other and kind of like talk about how great each other are.
Yeah.
With as much physical contact as possible. Like when they're going up the elevator, they're just like, "Are you going to love me forever?" And he's like, "Of course. If I were to leave, would you come get me?" "Yes, me too." And that was like the content of all of their conversations at that point. And there was just nothing left. Like I remember I think the last time I really thought, like, damn, why are they still a cute couple? This sucks. Was when she had that flower thing in her hair, and he was staring at her, and she said, like, "Stop staring at me." And he goes, "Oh, but you're so pretty." And she goes, "Okay, you can stare." And I was like, okay, I was like, shit, that's cute. But yeah, at a certain point, even they just kind of like faded.
It's such an adolescent idea of what love is, right? Like, it's when you're in love, all you want to do is sit there and talk about how in love you are.
Right.
Like, and that's like,
And
not how it is, but like, you know, that's
Yeah.
like such a teenage relationship thing. And if like they had not present it as like, oh no, this is actually the, and again, like it's like maybe they'll do something with this because it's such a obviously such a shallow relationship. But no, really is the greatest and truest love, where all they do is sit there and talk about how much they love each other.
I think you bring up a really good point. I actually discussed this a little bit previously with Emily, AJ the Fourth, Emily Rand, on Twitter, and she was mentioning how it's kind of ironic how Hiro and 02 end up in such an intensely unhealthy codependent relationship, and how that's actually a lot of like people's first love or first relationships and teenage relationships, right? Because like you believe like you found your soulmate and like they're everything that completes you, and in this really weird, ironic way, Darling in the FRANXX kind of portrays and shows that extremely unhealthy codependency between the two in the latter half of the show. And one of the best things about Darling in the FRANXX, this is probably the only good thing I'm going to say about Darling in the FRANXX other than the animation, but is a really good segment at the very end where Goro specifically calls out Hiro and being extremely selfish and just thinking of 02 all the time, when like clearly all of his friends are like having a really rough time in that period of the anime, and he's like, this is all you think about, just like you think about 02 and that's like your entire life. And I thought that was like such a good call out.
But then they walk it back.
They always walk it back. Yeah, that was another aspect of their relationship that I really disliked. I mean, I guess the relationship was fine, but 02 was an extremely inconsistent character.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when it came to like this out of nowhere desire to become human, which was sort of introduced around the halfway point, I guess.
Well, that was her whole, like, she remembered that was her whole motivation forever, was like she wanted to be human for him.
Literally didn't care. I was actually hoping they would lean into something where she's just like, hey, you want to run away or something like that?
Yeah.
Because it seemed like, I mean, why would she say that if she said, oh, if I kill enough Klaxosaurs, I'll become human? Had she given up?
Yeah.
Never explained. At a certain point, she like pushed Hiro away because she thought she was a monster, and then they reconcile. And then she does it again, and then they reconcile. And then in the last episode, she does, or like when she turns into a mech, she does it again, and like leaves her body behind or whatever because she wants him to be safe. And then he has to chase her into space, and they just reconcile again.
Yeah.
And eventually he'll just become a vestigial little like nerve center, like the Klaxosaurs did.
Yeah.
Underground.
But I remember when she started freaking out, it just seemed so crazy that she was suddenly doing that out of nowhere, because that was right after they found out that they were the childhood connection, right? Yeah. And then suddenly she starts like self-harming.
Yeah.
Or no, wait, that happened just before that. I just remember she was like happy with Hiro, right?
Yeah.
She said like, "Oh, cool, I'm like happy where I am," and then she starts self-harming. I mean, it repeated. So even if that wasn't before the childhood thing, that was literally the same pattern before and after. And then she suddenly decides that I'm going to be a monster, so this isn't going to work, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. There was no evidence of that beforehand. It was in direct conflict with her characterization in like the end of the last episode. I don't know. It just that kind of shit all the time.
It's just she's super inconsistent. Like it just felt like such a like low level taming of the shrew sort of thing.
Yeah,
I would say like high level taming.
Well, I say low level because it's like taming of the shrew. He tames her through like beating the shit out of her, whereas Hiro tames her by, I don't know,
being kind to her,
being kind and kind of boring, because Hiro has never been anything but boring. And then he took his boring disease and he infected her with it.
Yeah.
He was like
if boring were an STD. He gave it to her.
It implies a lot, right? Like, it implies, first of all, that, like, woman, and especially like, through the symbolism of the stamen and pistol, it's like, women are supposed to be very submissive. Like, that's the natural relationship of any romantic relationship, which is just, like, an absolute no. The second thing is, like, 02 is her nature of being wild, of being eccentric, of being someone
It's because she doesn't have a good man.
It's because she, first of all, it was an aspect of being a demon or being a like part Klaxosaur, but like you said, it's something that needs to be cured.
Right. And every wild woman just needs a good man to cure her.
Also, they tie that to humanity, and I think we should probably maybe like loop around to the idea of gender essentialism, like through that, because the idea of being human was necessarily being a man or a woman and reproducing
and making babies, which is so dumb to me because making babies is not what makes us human.
No,
making like the desire to reproduce is what makes us just like every single other animal out there.
It makes you alive. That's what you're...
Right,
yeah.
like it makes you alive because living beings, like humans are the exception because we are so like... because we have like so much more advanced concepts than just the drive to reproduce. Like,
Absolutely.
And that's what makes us different from the animals. Like being able to look at reproduction and decide, no, I don't want that is what makes us different from the other animals. Making babies is not what keeps our humanity.
Right.
Yeah. And even within the context of the show, it really couldn't tell us why that was important beyond just like, that's how it works right now, right? Because like they show you like the people, right, where Zorome falls and meets that one woman, and it's obviously she's like, her and her husband have this like sense of ennui, but there's no explanation for like why they would be that way.
Right.
Like they don't really tie their happiness to the fact that they were man or woman before, or that they had children, or that they could reproduce before. It's just like they don't have that anymore and therefore sad.
Right, which is a very common theme in stories about where people are immortal. It's like, oh, being immortal kind of actually sucks because you get bored. Like that's a very common thing. Like, why tie it to babies?
Well, I think, I mean, the idea was to tie it to babies. You just literally can't actually quantify why, so it just comes across as empty and vapid.
I think it also, and I'm not too well qualified to talk about this in depth. Maybe you guys could probably lend a hand, but my understanding was that it's probably some political or social commentary on the dwindling population.
There was a joke that the anime had been commissioned by Abe to help with their declining population.
Every so often you see just a picture of Kokoro with like an image of Abe like superimposed over her. Like,
God.
Got the symbol of what is it, Liberal Democratic Party?
Yeah.
But I mean, and then they even within the context of the show, it like does not sort of self-explain this, because the show in its own way tries to, and we're going to get to how bad this was later on. But I think the show thinks that it was treating Ikuno well, despite the fact that she was gay, which in the context of the show basically meant that she was inhuman.
Oh yeah, and ill.
Yeah, and how can you explain that?
Once again, but unlike 02, who is heterosexual, her illness can't be cured because she's a lesbian.
Yeah, so it's essentially but they don't treat her any differently.
No.
And she's not portrayed as being any less capable of happiness than the rest of them. I think they like try to give her kind of a happy ending, despite the fact that by the own internal logic of the show, she should be incapable of happiness, right? And by extension, every single gay person, or even somebody who just is sterile, or for some biological reason can't reproduce, all of them should be incapable of happiness according to the internal logic of the show. But it can never display it.
The show doesn't have a lot of internal logic to be fair.
Yeah, like another part of it, even at its own convenience, it sort of defied that. We were talking about the stamen pistol situation, and it was saying women can't be pistols or stamens. Women can't be stamens because who knows?
Yeah.
But then the nines later on, the women are the stamens, and they don't bother explaining it. They don't really. I mean, it's implied that they're kind of different, but not in such a way that any of that matters.
They're clones of 02, which is not how cloning works. Like, they're different genders than her, and they look different from her.
They're supposed to be more androgynous, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to be, and they specifically give a speech. It's like, oh, you want to go back to the gender stuff? Man, it's so much better without that. And you're supposed to disagree with them. And I'm just like, yeah, it is. Yeah. It is better without gender roles. But you're supposed to agree with Kokoro, who's like, no, men and women are different, and we should celebrate it being different because that means we can make babies.
Yeah, but even if you really look at their situation, though, it looks like they were specifically, and by extent, I think most of the children are discouraged from showing any sort of gendered behavior, or they're basically supposed to just be as non-gendered as possible, even though the fact that they are boys and girls is the defining aspect that lets them pilot the mechs that they're using. So it's like, we're really good at this because we were genetically designed to be androgynous, even though the only thing that allows people to pilot mechs is being men and women and pairing up.
Yeah. It's a lot of conflicting ideas.
Yeah.
And it results in like a very large confusion of like what the show is trying to say, if it's trying to say anything at all. Which is why, like, when these episodes happen, I was like, I don't understand what your stance on sexuality is. I don't understand your stance on you keep swapping sides, and in being incommittal, like you're basically like just saying, well, it is what it is, and like, you know, we're just gonna stick with what we know, aka gender basics. So I guess that's our stance, and you're just like, well, why bring up a counter argument in the first place?
Right.
You know?
And it's such like a very basic idea. Like it is the way that they depict gendered behavior is like so like, you know, it very much assumes that like the way things are now is the natural order.
Right.
Like, you know, the fact like you know, I wrote this article about like the episode with the boys versus girls thing. It's like, if they're being raised and they have no concept of sex, like, why would the girls be embarrassed at the boys seeing them?
Oh yeah, that was another problem. Like, apparently they were both supposed to be an experiment where they were allowed to express gender.
Right.
But also it was very clear that they were told that they had said that they were denied knowledge of so many things. Mm-hmm. But also
like love.
They were clearly expressing those concepts all the time as if they had been culturated in the modern day.
Like, because
they were just like, the difference between boys and girls, you know, like, that's just how it is. Like, you were told that by somebody. Come on, where did you get that idea from?
Right, like, this stuff is learned, like, and, like, girls learn to feel ashamed when people say them naked. Like, boys learn that women's bodies are inherently sexual in all contexts.
Right.
Like, this is not something that is natural. Like, this is not something that is going to spring fully formed with a bunch of kids who have no concept of sex, who don't have as much of a concept of gender roles. Like, but they present it as this. Like, it's insulting. Yeah. Honestly, it's really insulting.
Mm-hmm. I didn't write this on the show notes, but I guess it might be worth talking about Ichigo. Did she end up getting together with Goro?
Yeah.
I fucking missed
she was pregnant at the end.
That's right.
Because babies, because everyone had to get together and make babies.
I knew that was going to happen, and I was so pissed off at that idea because basically it was showing a double standard as well. And specifically, there was even a negative fan reaction to this because episode 14, where Ichigo was pretty sure that 02 was going to like rip Hiro's head off, so she was trying to keep her away from him.
Oh, right, and people were saying horrible
like,
things.
Kill Ichigo or kill him, shit like that. They were getting death threats. So that's, I mean, there's probably a lot to unpack there, but we'll keep it to the show. But
don't need to go into the fandom.
Basically, a lot of those arguments sort of came down to the idea that Hiro didn't owe Ichigo anything because...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was obviously in love with 02. He made his decision. She just needed to live with it. But on the same coin, or the other side, I don't know how that saying works, whatever. However the saying works, Goro was constantly at Ichigo's side and supporting her and stuff. And people said, well, he's been there the whole time. He's helping you out. Well, why don't you just, love him because he's a good guy? Mm-hmm. So it's basically exactly the same dynamic Ichigo has to Hiro, Goro has to Ichigo. But for some reason... Goro has earned Ichigo's love, whereas Ichigo needs to accept that Hiro does not love her.
Well, that's because they can sympathize with Goro, but not with Ichigo.
Exactly.
Because girls are icky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's. I have complicated feelings on Ichigo because on one hand, I think she possibly is the best result of a lot of the quirks and personalities that 02 ended up losing. She's willing to fight for what she believes in. She rebels against the rules eventually. So I think she does embody a lot of interesting aspects.
Yeah.
But once again, because her arc is solely devoted to being like the third wheel or the love interest, or not the love interest, or that, Hiro is the love interest for her, and it's just focused on that aspect. None of those other aspects are explored.
Her arc is entirely defined by her relationship with the boys around her.
Exactly.
I would say she's, like, narratively the most interesting character. But, pretty much all of her subplots are undermined at some point.
Yeah.
Like, her struggle to be a leader was probably the most biggest sort of intellectual conflict that any of them had, because this was, or I should say emotional, I guess, that like, cause this was a constant struggle for her, and that was kind of a cool feature of her character until you learned that Hiro used to be the leader, and it just came naturally to him because people followed him. So she was struggling to do something that Hiro could do literally without any effort at all.
Right. And, God, like, when they're like, oh, Hiro is such a natural leader, and, like, he's so charismatic, everyone just wants to... I'm like, really not boring?
Yeah, I mean, well, and it connected pretty much every single relationship that it connected back to their childhood because somebody had done something for somebody else. That's like a larger theme in anime that I'm really not very comfortable with.
No.
It seems like love almost always kind of results from a favor or something that somebody said somebody did this great thing for me, and at that moment I loved them, which I don't like that sort of like transactional love that is very common in anime, but in this series it was literally like if somebody liked somebody, you could trust that there would be a flashback to when they were kids, and that person did something for that person. And
I think that's kind of it's complicated because I understand that sentiment. Once again, I don't feel like, at least from an Indian perspective, one thing I've always empathized with very deeply in anime is the bonds of familial love. Now whether that's separated into like romantic love or like platonic love is something that's very different, but I think it's less of favors and it's more of like none of these children, which once again I don't think Darling in the Franxx explained very well, but it's just something I always kind of acknowledge, is that a lot of these kids didn't have families, they only had each other. So something I wish maybe Darling in the Franxx could have explored is this interconnective relationship of family. Which it's kind of just like glossed over, right? They're like, oh, like we're just best friends, we're just that's all we have is each other. But in a show like, I'll bring up Nagino Asukara, there is a similar relationship between all of these people who are also trying to fight romantic relationships, or they find that they like someone who they consider part of their family for a very long time. But one thing I really like about Nagiasu that Darling in the Franxx never does is that there's
just since not every site uses the Japanese title.
Yes,
do you want to give the English title? Just
A Lull in the Sea. I think it's called A Lull in the Sea. Yeah. Okay. Which you can watch on Crunchyroll. It's one of the things I really like about that show is that it balances the idea of romantic relationships with familial relationships. Like, you can have both.
Right.
Whereas Darling in the Franxx is like, well, if this girl is paired with this guy, then this guy has to be paired with this girl. And I guess the lesbian doesn't really get anyone because there's no one left.
The lesbian gets with the fat kid.
Yeah, it's just like wait, you can have both, right? Like you can. And once again, that's something I wish that was explored more in Darling in the Franxx.
maybe it's worth talking about. Well, there's two gay characters.
Oh yes.
Actually.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
Mitsuru.
Yeah. And just
boy, did that piss me off.
Oh, that was.
I don't really know if there was a resolution to Mitsuru. I know he very obviously loved Hiro.
Oh yeah.
And then
vanished.
I literally don't know what happened. He just like
He found the right woman.
Kokoro kept saying "I love you" until he just decided that maybe he should be straight.
Well, you know how we just mentioned that 02 is someone that needed a man to be cured. Literally the same for
yeah.
It's just for homosexuality, right? It's just
right, and I can see that. Like, I can see that being another case where they just don't realize the implications of what they're saying. I don't think they specifically went out to be like, well, and this does not excuse it. I don't think they went out and were like, well, Mitsuru's gay, and then he and Kokoro get together and he's cured. But, like, I think that they just did not, like, they set up this system of symbols and they didn't think about the implications of it. And so it doesn't matter whether it was intentional or not. They implied that Mitsuru was gay and he was cured by love of a woman. Love, the only word they weren't allowed to learn.
I mean, the series strongly associates them piloting with sex, right?
Right.
And he wanted to pilot with Hiro, so it speaks for itself. Just like Ikuno wanted to pilot with Ichigo.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because wasn't there a whole situation where he not only like he had this promise with Hiro about piloting.
Yeah, they pilot
and then
together.
it's just like magically forgotten.
Well, no, I think the way they played it off was like it was a naive promise made among kids. Hiro didn't remember because he got his brain wiped, but
Oh yeah, that's right. He gets
Mitsuru
brain
didn't
wiped.
remember that, and he should have realized that it was impossible from the beginning, and it's not really Hiro's fault.
Of
or
course,
something like
yeah. But once again, it's like that whole revolving around Hiro as like the love, like
Because everything revolves around him.
it's around him, right?
Once again, the blandest character is the main one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even that I think Ikuno's, because like she got a scene, right?
Right, yeah.
I
She
think
gets
that's
that
the-
scene with Ichigo.
Oh man,
That's the
And
angriest
Ichigo's
I've ever
like,
been in the
oh,
series,
God,
I think.
Oh,
That
yeah.
scene.
Oh, yeah. Having an unrequited crush on a guy who already has a girlfriend is totally the same as being a
It's
lesbian.
exactly the same as being a lesbian in a world that doesn't recognize homosexuality at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then they never bring it up again. They're
Well,
just
and
like,
then,
okay.
then she just and her heart is cured by
Oh.
that by Ichigo's empathy, I guess.
Oh, yeah,
For her
excellent.
situation, she's just like, I know how you're suffering, and literally that's I guess all Ikuno really needed was to know that somebody understood that she wasn't having a nice time.
Oh, but it's
And-
not enough to save her because she's terminally ill.
Right.
And
Oh well, I mean, that was different.
But
right?
she gets to be in love with her nurse.
I guess
Yeah.
that's more of a bury your gaze thing, right?
quote,
Yeah.
quote,
That's
maybe.
They just that was just a way to get rid of her, so they wouldn't have to address the fact that she was going to live for the rest of her life without love. I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, but like I think it always it ties into this concept, right? Like a girl cannot be rebellious or quirky or
Different.
different, right? Unless she's cured by having a normal man in her life. A boy cannot be in a relationship with another boy because that's just wrong, and he needs to be cured by having a very motherly figure in his life because that's what women should be. And then a lesbian just can't be cured, period.
Yeah.
And fuck that. Good luck. Like guess you're fucked.
But
right?
it's okay because she got to be helpful by
Yeah.
sacrificing herself
Yeah.
for Kokoro.
That was
Exactly.
the worst part.
Like
Directly afterwards, she just became super genki and wanted to help everybody and like a contributing member of the group.
Yeah.
Just because Ichigo
Yeah.
said like, "Oh yeah, I understand you."
Yeah.
That
Oh, we're not
fixes
so
it.
different, you and
Yeah.
I. Now I see. I'm like everyone else.
That fixes an entire childhood of feeling emotionally isolated from everyone you know and love.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we talk about poor Futoshi?
Oh
now?
yeah.
Oh man.
It really just hits like I'm struggling to find ways that it wasn't like.
It was just
Yeah.
so like, and like, listen, I don't want to be like, oh, how could Kokoro leave him? Like she can make her own choices, whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I mean that by itself is fine.
yeah, like he is not she is not obligated to be with him.
And if you'd done that to Mitsuru or something like that, that would have been cool. But the fact that it was Futoshi, the fat guy, who was the butt of
Yeah.
every single joke, that was basically it made it look like yet another situation where it's just like he's fat, so he's not a real person.
Right.
So, like, let's have it happen to him because nobody empathizes with Futoshi. That way
Yeah,
we
he's
can
just a
focus
funny
on
guy.
Kokoro's
And then-
drama.
And it was
Yeah.
just like, it was so cruel to him. The writing over and over, like making him like be the priest at their wedding.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was...
like
Why?
I yelled at my computer screen. Like, I was like,
Does he deliver their baby?
maybe.
I don't actually remember.
He becomes like their priest, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know he definitely
Okay.
becomes.
And
the
he's like,
priest.
I'm gonna do this.
Maybe he delivered baby. Yeah, he wanted to officiate their wedding because he wanted to like do that for Kokoro at least or something.
yeah.
Well, first they kind of dehumanize him by making him like incredibly possessive of Kokoro, right? They're like, oh, like don't touch my Kokoro-chan. She's like, you better not do anything to her. I was like, first of all, like, hands off. First of
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
second of all, like get your shit together, and then they give him an eating disorder.
Yeah. Which just kind of disappears.
Yeah. Oh god, I was wondering for a moment there if they actually planned to do something because that was an intense scene.
yeah.
Like I somebody noticed. I mean, they showed some like scenes where he was acting weird, and then somebody noticed that he just wasn't eating at the dinner table, and I think he even tries to eat, but he can't keep it down, so he just throws up literally in the middle of the group.
Yeah.
And somebody like outs him, says you're not eating, and he's like, well, and he even like he basically implies says the reason Kokoro didn't let me is because I'm fat. And all you guys make fun of me because I'm fat.
Yeah.
So why would I want to be fat?
And
I'm
then they
not
just
going to eat.
And then they just keep making fun of him for
Didn't
being fat.
They like ended the scene. It was like a fade to black with all of them looking at Futoshi puking onto the ground and like crying.
Yeah.
And
it was so weird.
then they just the next scene, everyone's acting normally again, and they completely forgot that happened. that's so weird because it shows to me that they had like a mental awareness of how they had dehumanized Futoshi, and wanted to show that they were aware that they dehumanized him, but they didn't want to actually do anything with it.
Right, like
then,
it's so strange.
Yeah.
Like, and then
is he the only one without like besides Ikuno that doesn't have like a girlfriend in the end too?
No, he gets married. He has like 5 babies.
He gets married to a girl
and he grows
we've
a
never
really
seen before.
and he grows a really bad mustache.
Oh,
God, yeah, that mustache is fucking
He
awful.
turns into Paul Blart.
Yeah, that's right, he's Paul Blart.
It's pretty shitty.
I really liked Gabo's response when she saw us. Like, Futoshi, wipe your fucking face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess they at least gave him that, but like I don't know, just the whole story treated him like shit. He was always the butt of every joke, and I mean it was like transparently because he was fat. They said they literally said in the story that he was the butt of every joke because he's fat, and they said that like among the characters and also by implication narratively, all of the jokes that we've put into the series. He was the butt of them because he's fat as well.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, just so you know.
well, there's
Well,
that scene, right?
Also, that can have horrible psychological conflict.
Yeah,
like which can lead to eating disorders. Just so you know. But we were not going to do anything with that. We just want you to know.
Doesn't Zorame like that's the thing though? Zorame, like, there's a point in the scene where Zorame's like, you shouldn't harm yourself because like you don't deserve that. And
I think he kind of said that's bullshit or something.
Yeah, it's like a poignant scene because Zorame was the one who was always making those jokes. I was just like, oh shit, this is going to go somewhere. Zorame is going to get like fucking grow up and not make these stupid jokes. No, it never happens. He's like, all right, like I guess you're right.
And this is the point where it sinks in that Darling in the Franxx is never going to do anything interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that was that the moment that was supposed to cure Futoshi right there? Was Zorome going like, you really shouldn't do that. It's bad for you. And he's like, oh shit, it is bad for me.
I'm cured.
I'm cured.
Guess I'll stay fat and continue being the butt of every joke, and everyone's not going to treat me differently anyway. Yeah. Even after they've seen like literally the negative psychological effects of their years of abuse.
But I will get to make babies, so you know that's clearly.
But I get a girlfriend in the end,
Yeah.
and we've established narratively that that's the only important thing.
And then he does become a baker.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he loves bread.
Yeah.
They reminded us of that a lot. One small thing, I didn't see too many people bring this up, but this scene just pissed me off so bad, was when Nana comes back, and her disappearance was, oh my god.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, literally her concern for the children's, like, okay, first of all, she's, like, what, in mid-20s, something like that? Extremely, like, prominent secondary sexual characteristics, right?
Yeah.
Hourglass figure, all that. And her concern for the children's caused her to spontaneously enter puberty, which I don't know why that's a thing. Because, I guess they were former pilots, right?
Yeah.
But, like, puberty is the time typically when you know, develop, start getting that hourglass figure, right? That's when all the secondary sexual characteristics develop.
Yeah.
So if she's going through puberty, I don't know what she would look like afterward, because she's like, I don't know, like near 6 foot tall.
Like the girls in the show are already very clearly going through puberty.
Yeah.
Like,
well, my understanding was that she used to be a pilot, right?
And she was, I think, from a more standard squad where they do whatever they do to inhibit your gender. I'm assuming that's what the reason was, but at this point.
Well,
she's been through puberty. It's clear she's been through puberty.
Is it less of restricting gender in terms of like biological, like sexual, like, you know, they're going to develop, you know, like the girls develop like they're pretty sexual.
The girls have
that's the thing, right?
Emotional. Like they restrict gender tropes, but they don't restrict gender, like not gender, but like sexual, like characteristics.
Right? By necessity, the kids have to be able to reproduce.
Right. Yes.
Right.
But they don't socialize them with gender, except maybe the main characters that was actually not established.
Right. Like
implied,
it's like an experimental
implied, but then also directly contradicted.
Yeah.
If she was from a normal squad, so she would need to be like not inhibited biologically, just socially.
Yeah, right.
So,
but then there's that thing where they're like, oh, once you reach puberty or like an age, we like wipe off your emotions. I believe
Hachi's maybe I don't have any emotions,
right?
Maybe they give them the procedure so that they
I would care.
So they're
are incapable of reproducing.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
So they're inhibited sexually. They're inhibited emotionally.
So what the fuck is spontaneous puberty?
So I think the concept of this is that by interacting with children who are
brought out her natural maternal urges,
exactly.
which are natural and the only reason to live.
Yes, and also because like they are they're in their sexual stage of puberty that somehow triggers her like getting emotions, which I can
Maybe
I kind
that's
of
what they
understand
call puberty
that.
now.
Yeah.
Or
like,
I don't know.
Well, there's
it was a throwaway line that made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Right.
There we go.
It's just
I was like, I've never been so confident that a character had gone through puberty already.
it's confusing because like Darling in the Franxx confuses like emotions for sexuality, and then like they just like they intertwine, but then they don't, and it's like I don't know what you're trying to say. Like, are you trying to say that we can't have emotions without being sexual? Or are you saying that like we can be sexual but not have emotions? Or like I don't understand like where you're going with this. And I feel like she is like the perfect representation of that confusion because like you said, right, she comes back and
that might be very telling about, I mean, I don't want to imply anything about like the understanding of of that kind of stuff by the writers, but it does raise some questions.
No shit. Well, like, there's that point where she's in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
We have no fucking clue what happened.
Yeah, oh my, They locked her in a cell for gender crimes, and when she finally gets out, she's in a wheelchair.
Right.
But that's the
But then she can get out of the
But then she gets out of the wheelchair.
So she's in a
Because
wheelchair for that episode. Yeah. She's... They don't bother explaining why she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then she sees a crying child and finds the strength to get out of her wheelchair.
Maternal instincts, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I assume it's just like anybody in a wheelchair. It's just a lack of motivation is what it really is.
Yeah.
So, and it seemed like such a throwaway moment. Like, literally could have not been in the series at all. Probably could have, like, spent some more time showing us mech battles or something like that. Don't know why she got that character moment. Don't even know why they really brought her back, because she didn't really do
She
too
didn't
much.
do anything.
So it's like
she was there to be moved.
Yeah. They
thing.
specifically brought her back and gave her 3 minutes of screen time so they could be ableist. It seemed like.
Well, I think it brings us back to that maternal point, right? Like, for example, like we've established that the Darling in the Franxx kids, once again, restrictive on gender tropes, not restrictive on sexual like budding, and then not restrictive on emotional budding as well. And then you have this character who has been depleted or stripped of being in a like having sexual feelings, but being with kids evokes this motherly response because that's what women should be. They like that's the proper figure of mothers, right? A woman is to be a mother. So it kind of once again goes like takes 10 steps back. It's like, well, I guess like if you understand your position in society, like and firmly work with gender tropes as being like a mom in society, yeah, sure, you can get emotions.
She finally finished her puberty.
Yeah, she finally finished her puberty and she's a mom.
I just want to say like that, and that conception, the idea that women are naturally maternal, that we are naturally good at being kids, at taking care of kids, like that pisses me off so bad because that is a major part of what is keeping my profession. Teaching preschool, teaching toddlers, that's what keeps it from being more of a respected position.
Absolutely.
Like, because it's like, oh, well, like, why would we consider this skilled labor? Why would we consider this a difficult job that you need training and that you need knowledge, like specific knowledge to do? If it's just something that comes naturally to you as a woman, and it's like it's so frustrating. Because it is a job that requires a lot of specialized knowledge, and I'm pretty sure like the situation with daycare teachers and elementary school teachers in Japan has a lot of parallels to that attitude, as well as in the U.S.
I mean, I think you can even extend that mentality to... We were discussing before about how 0-2 becomes, like, less interesting of a character. Or many of the things that made her so appealing or interesting are just kind of slowly, like, stripped away. And I think a lot of it is, like... I wouldn't say she's maternal, but a lot of those characteristics are emulative of, like, oh, like, I'll take care of you. Oh, like, we'll complete this together. Who's going to be there for hero if not me? Right, and it's just like right, like it kind of
like angry women are just there because they're selfish,
exactly,
and they need to learn to not be selfish, and then they'll be happy, and then they'll be tame,
right? Yeah. And like her relationship with the cast, which once again is actually not an issue I have. I like that. At first, like she couldn't get along with the cast, and then her getting along with Ichigo is actually one of the coolest things I actually like about the show. Is like Ichigo being like, well, like outside of hero and whatever the fuck you have with him, I can respect you as, like, a colleague.
Right.
which I wish was something they could have explored a little further in, but, whatever. But once she does get to know the cast, she's also taken.
Yeah, like it's like she started once she like starts chilling out, being with Hiro, then instantly she connects with the girls so much more strongly.
Exactly.
Like all of a sudden she is there with them, like doing each other's hair.
Yeah,
and, like
there's that episode.
Like before she couldn't connect with them. And
right.
It's just like, oh well, girls like.
It would almost appear as if being a human as a girl means being a motherly or empathetic figure,
right? Like, but it makes me feel like it's very complicated with the whole like I'm not like other girls thing, right? Like with
right,
but at the same time, like growing up being kind of like a nerdy girl, being kind of a weird girl, there were a lot of times where like I would be in groups of like normie girls,
yeah,
and I would have a lot of trouble connecting to them because they talked a lot about stuff I didn't really have any interest in. Like
absolutely.
It's not just a matter of I'm not like other girls. It's like I do not share interests with these mainstream feminine the mainstream feminine interests, and it's like so like when she's not able to connect to the other girls, not because she's not like them, but just because she doesn't have common ground with them, I could connect to that. But the moment that she, like I said, the moment she gets with Hiro, like settles her issues with Hiro and realizes that she totally gets along with the other girls.
She's cured. There you go.
Like it's
Did you ever think about the fact, though, that her entire narrative also conflicts with the general message of the story? Because the only way you're be able to be happy is by reproducing, right? Which she's incapable of. And she's also on her quest to become human, and it frames becoming human as being part of the community, not reproducing. So she effectively becomes human, they say, despite the fact that she can't do the things that are fundamentally considered to be what comprises a human.
A really good point, which I actually didn't think about, which is, so like you said, she's kind of doomed in that sense. But I don't know if you know this, but at the very end of the last episode, she and Hiro figuratively die, but because they love each other so much, they are reincarnated on Earth as human beings.
Yeah, but
so she does get her happy ending because she's going to be a human.
But I mean,
and she gets
there's a few more steps in the process.
The thing was, there was nothing to imply that she would not have been happy had it not been the fact that she needed to fight some sort of intergalactic threat and die. Like, if that hadn't happened, she was perfect. She was now, although they could always walk it back a fifth time, perfectly happy with this community of pilots, and she felt like she was part of them, and there was no problem. In fact, they loved each other more than just about anybody else did, despite the fact that they couldn't reproduce. So had not she needed to fight the Verm, I guess, then she never would have died, and they probably would have lived happily ever after anyway, right?
Well, I think we firmly established that I think Darling in the FRANXX has an issue or a consistency of being inconsistent with its follow-ups.
That's also true of the Klaxosaurs, because they were considered to be more human than humans are now.
Know what the Klaxosaurs was about.
Well, because they think they're I mentioned this earlier, like there are parallels between what Hiro and 02 become with the giant woman robot thing and him piloting her off into space. And, like, the Klaxosaurs going underground and, like, the females becoming these, like, big monster things and the males, like, are the nerve center, basically.
Like the part that lights up on the anglerfish that used to be the male fish.
No, that didn't used to be the male fish. That's, like, they're, like, stick to, like, the gonads. It's crazy. Yeah. Anglerfish are weird. It is very anglerfish,
Sorry for misrepresenting anglerfish biology. But I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 because you'd like a story to have internal consistency, but if the message is that you fundamentally cannot be happy unless you want to reproduce, and that if you are a woman or a man, you have specific roles that cannot be impinged upon, it's kind of also okay that the writing's not good. Because the worse they are at trying to justify that sort of logic, probably the better.
Yeah.
So in that way, I definitely have mixed feelings about the writing.
Hey guys, this doesn't have to do with like gender stuff, but another drop plotline is like, oh, what about like Ikuno's whole crisis about like, oh, the pilots before us died. Like it looked like they were going to do something with that, and 02 is like, oh, they're all doomed. They're all gonna die. Like
so, my reading of that was, once again, I'm so bad at remembering names, but okay, the woman who was being a motherly figure to the children,
Nana.
Yeah.
So my understanding was
007.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that she was an exception to the rule in the sense that if the kids aren't successful, they are either killed off or they are stripped of their sexual reproductive issues and also their feelings for each other, and that's why they like.
Well, and they're refrigerated.
Yeah, they're basically refrigerated.
Yeah. I think the idea is when they're about to hit puberty, they're just like, okay, we're done with you now. You can either become a, oh my god, it's just like the Promised Neverland.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. You can either be killed or become a parent, right?
Yeah. You can be like an old woman that lives her dreams by like, I don't know, like virtual reality. Like, I don't know what the hell.
I mean, I don't think it was even virtual reality. I think it was just like a stimulating the pleasure centers of the brain.
Oh yeah, the happiness machines. They
Yeah.
have. And is that they sort of qualify that's bad as well?
Yeah.
So you're not living life.
That episode was so confusing.
It's
was just like
just a lot of half-baked ideas
that just deflate. They're baked halfway to completion, and then they deflate again.
They fall like a bad souffle.
I'd like to believe that the writing's bad because there's literally no good way to write that because it is in fact
bad,
just incorrect and bad, and
Yeah.
there's no way to justify that sort of line of thinking.
Well, so I'm going off of very hard assumptions because I haven't really kept a track of the production process of Darling in the Franxx, but going on the very legitimate Wikipedia page, I see multiple writers for Darling in the Franxx, and I'm not sure if that might be a contributing issue to why it felt so uneven, but it definitely felt at points like different people were writing different parts of the story.
Right.
I mean that's
is
pretty
it,
common in
like,
anime, though.
Like, yeah,
it might be. I'm not sure.
Is it different, like people doing multiple people doing series composition, or is it multiple people doing scripts? Because
I believe, if I go back, it is written by, and the list follows, Atsushi Nishigori, Naotaka Hayashi, Masahiko Otsuka, Rino Yamazaki, and Hiroshi Seko. So I don't know if these are
listed as primary writers.
It says yeah,
because like it's I would probably go to ANN for that because they specifically list the series like they're more specific in the
absolutely
listings, because I believe Nishigori was doing series composition, which is basically like, you know, the flow of the series.
That is the one who's supposed to keep it all together.
Yeah, like so, and listen, if that's the case, if he's the one,
vacation.
then it's on him.
Yeah.
Like,
but
but if
again,
but anime is a collaborative medium.
But I mean, I'm pretty. I think. I'm going to say I believe what Evan says. I have no reason to believe he's lying.
Right.
I don't know. But the one thing he really emphasized that was that Nishigori was like the primary creative force behind the anime. So.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably speculate on this.
Not to just go like, it's your fault or anything like that. But yeah, it's hard to say.
We can speculate this all we want. But I think the end result, which feels very like affirmative for all of us, is that the show felt extremely uneven to the point where like I felt there was an immediate conflict of interests and ideas across the entire show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think it's pretty much time for us to wrap up. Yeah. So,
did we miss anything?
Did we miss anything? Is there anything you want?
I feel like we scratched the surface.
I know
so much,
but we could talk about this all
hours.
I feel like I think I got all the main themes I wanted to discuss. I mean, of course, I feel like we could have. In an hour, there's only so much you could do. You could definitely go by like an episode by episode or event by event sort of description on.
I think the only thing I want to talk about is lastly is just Kokoro's pregnancy. Like the whole. So for example,
the whole thing.
The whole thing. The whole idea that she can't pilot the FRANXX when she's pregnant.
Even though she does.
Even though she does.
Yeah.
Yeah. She also has a kid whom she names after I.
Oh, yeah.
Which she was never taught.
The word we were never taught.
Right? And the baby then has the ability to, like, mentally, like, link itself with God knows what. Like, I don't even know. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like I understand the deep lore of Darling in the Franxx.
The first baby born in 1,000 years.
Oh, yes. Right? But, like, just the implications of, like, wow, like, it's amazing. This is a miracle.
What a miracle child.
This is a miracle.
And positioning, something that is absolutely the power establishments, like, what they want you to do, and taking that and presenting it as something that is subversive and rebellious is so, like, shitty.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really talk about.
And that's,
yeah, they basically talked about how the status quo is like the rebel faction thing. Yeah,
and I'm working on an article about that. So,
mind you, this is after Mitsuru and Kokoro have been brainwashed and don't have any, like, feelings for each other, but they reach, like, emotional conclusion by having a child.
You can't stop love.
Yeah, of course.
Can't stop it.
This isn't the princess part,
right?
Which is by
and
far
he, like,
much better.
He collapses when he finds out. He's like, "What am I gonna do?" It's like, A, how do you know it's yours?
Yeah.
B, like, why are you acting like a 16-year-old who found out his high school girlfriend is pregnant instead of like a 14-year-old who has no concept of parenthood? Like,
also, how did they learn? I'm like
Kokoro finds a book,
but does that really teach them how to fuck? Because let's be real. Like, he was just let's just
you know what it is. It was instinct because all people have a
that's
natural
right. Yes,
understanding
sorry.
how to do that.
Yeah.
That was also something I was, like, very confused about. I was like, so you guys don't know what love is, but you guys manage to have sex. Like, I don't really understand how that works out, but sure. Okay.
Yeah, and so, Kokoro's pregnancy is sort of going into the politics of childbirth, of the decision of whether or not to have a child is, unfortunately, that is one of those things that should be politically neutral, but is not. And because nothing is politically neutral. And, like, it's definitely, like, it's like, oh, it is so, like, brave to have a baby when no one says you should have a baby. Isn't teen pregnancy swell, guys?
It's just fantastic all around.
Feel good for that baby, being the first one born in, like, so many...
No one's going to know how to handle the fucking baby.
Why is it screaming so much? I don't know what to do. Well, I guess they raise, like, genetic babies. But even then, there's no... I guess, is the baby being psychic supposed to mean that a baby born naturally just has superpowers that a baby made in a test tube could not possibly approach? Were these all like not they didn't have the strength of real humans fighting off these aliens?
Well, I just love that of all the people that we spent the time with in this show, it's a baby and not the entire cast that we've literally spent 24 episodes establishing friendship relationships with. Is the one that's like, oh, Hiro and Zero Two are in trouble, and we need to save them, and we should just all hold hands and tell them to come back
and clap if you believe in fairies.
And I think that's probably the most unsatisfying thing. Is like, okay, so you brought forth this miracle into the world, and now they're just going to be a giant plot device, or like just to get Hiro and Zero Two to fight one more time.
Hiro TP.
Yeah. But that's basically the only thing I felt like was needed to be addressed.
I ship Darling in the FRANXX with neural pruning.
I wouldn't disagree.
It seems like you're already working on that one.
I know. It's like I said, I completely forgot. Like, I came back from AX, I was exhausted, and I was like, man, what's one show I can just knock out of the park before the next season starts? I was like, oh yeah, Darling in the FRANXX had a final episode, and I watched it, I finished it, I was like, that was great, and I went to bed.
Yeah. It is worth mentioning, like, I mean, this series has a ton of defenders. And it was mega popular, but I think near the end, nobody could really... Even the most ardent fans were having trouble justifying the
insane plot twist.
Yeah, you could see that its popularity was falling off, although it remained controversial and got a ton of extra comments and stuff.
The article I wrote about it earlier in the first season, there's only like 1 or 2 comments that got through, because like on our site, like 90%, we got a ton of comments on it, but most of them were abusive.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that shit on ANN too.
Yeah,
I think Jake even tweeted that. You could tell, comparative popularity probably by just the amount of reads, where Tokyo Ghoul, would completely blew Darling in the FRANXX out of the water, but Darling in the FRANXX had, 800 times more comments. So...
Yeah. Is a show designed for discourse.
But hey, it's done, and...
We'll see how those BD sales go, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, alright, shall I play us out?
Let's do it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast episode about Darling in the FRANXX. If you haven't already been there, our website is, and of course, I almost forgot. Thank you to Natasha for joining us.
Thank you for bringing me on board.
So if you don't already know about it somehow, our website is animefeminist.com. And we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/animefeminist. If you can donate even $1 a month, that is super helpful to the site. It has made it possible for us to break even, to pay all of the writers and editors, and there's still so many things that we want to do. We want to make the site more accessible. We want to be able to travel to conventions and be able to bring you guest interviews. Whatever you can give, even $1 a month, it adds up, and it's super helpful in making Anime Feminist even better. We also have quite a few social media accounts. We're on Twitter @AnimeFeminist, on Tumblr @AnimeFeminist, and on Facebook here's the twist, @AnimeFem. So come visit us, drop us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And I think that concludes our episode. Thanks for listening, AniFam.